Good evening. We are conducting our Palace Press briefing in Hong Kong, and I'm joined here by Secretary Martin Andanar. Expected also to join us later on are Foreign Affairs Secretary Alan Peter Cayetano, as well as Department of Labor Secretary Bello. No? Now, preliminary statement. In the bilateral meeting, President Rodrigo Roa Duterte first thanked China for its military assistance during the rebellion in Marawi, and as well for China's assistance on the ongoing rehabilitation efforts in the Islamic city. No? The President likewise reiterated its Philippines One China policy, highlighting that this is why the recent extradition of certain individuals were extradited to China, and that he looks forward in the expansion of cooperation between the two countries in the areas of tourism, e-commerce, infrastructure development, police cooperation, among others. Now, the President also took the occasion to show his appreciation to his Chinese force for allowing 100,000 Filipino English teachers to work in China. In addition, while highlighting that we do not take sides on the ongoing trade war between, or possible trade war between China and the United States, the President nonetheless had positive words to say, and to the effect that it's high time for China to protect the East and the cause of trade liberalism at this time and age. Now, as you know, as a result of this agreement, there was a grant of 500 million RMB, or equivalent to 3.8 billion, given to the Philippines by China in terms of economic and infrastructure assistance. Now, in the bilateral talks, it was actually President Xi who mentioned the West Philippine Sea issue, although he highlighted the need to focus on promoting stability in the region and strengthening communication to avoid untoward incidents. No? There was also a positive mention of continuing joint offshore oil development in the area. Of course, both Philippines and China acknowledged that they will soon sign a memorandum of understanding on the Belt and Road Initiative. No? Now, there was also a mention of projects to be financed by the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, particularly flood control projects in Metro Manila. Amongst the bilateral agreements signed between the two countries included an agreement on economic and technical cooperation between the government and the two governments, exchange of letters on Phase 3 of the Technical Cooperation Project for the Philippine Sino Center for Agricultural Technology, exchange of letters for the pre-feasibility study of the proposed Davao City Expressway project, letters of on providing a batch of broadcasting equipment to the Presidential Communication Operations Office of the Philippines, and you can ask Secretary Andanar about it. Memorandum of Understanding on the deployment of Philippine teachers of English language in China, preferential buyer's credit loan agreement on the Chico River Road irrigation project between the Export-Import Bank of China as lender and the government of the Republic of the Philippines, acting by and through the Department of Finance as borrower. As you know, there was also like 9.5 billion worth of projects, private projects, the signing of which were witnessed by the President. All of these projects clearly is basis for all Filipinos para maging happy with Duterte. We will entertain questions now, and Secretary Martin Andanar, please, on the broadcast equipment.
Maraming salamat, Sec Harry. Magandang gabi po. Good evening to everyone who's here, the media, and our fellow Filipinos who are watching the different channels in the Philippines and on social media. The spokesperson did mention that China already did release or gave us the go signal to proceed with our radio projects in the Philippines, specifically improving the infrastructure of the Philippine broadcast PBS system, and one of the letters of the letters that I signed with my counterpart during the bilateral was the 17 million renminbi aid that China has given the Philippines, and it is a very good indication that China is very committed to helping our government media in the Philippines improve its services. And that is just the beginning, because I have spoken with Ambassador Zhao, and he did mention that there's another 100 million pesos that will be on its way for the Philippine Broadcast Service also, the PBS or the Philippine National Radio. Now, during the bilateral also, it also gave me reason to be very, very happy with Duterte, because President Xi also mentioned specifically the importance of media exchange between the Philippines and China and the rest of ASEAN. So this only means that the scholarships that China has been giving the country, the Philippines, specifically to the media members of government, will continue for the next 4 years. So that was the first time that President Xi mentioned the importance of media exchange between our country and China. And as you may know, that one of our major goals under the Duterte administration is to improve our government media, PTV, Radyo Pilipinas, Philippine News Agency, and the Philippine Information Agency. Thank you.
First question.
Questions? We're still hoping to have Secretary Alan Peter Cayetano with us in 3 minutes. So may I ask that if you have questions, ask on other issues other than on foreign relations
Ace Romero.
first.
Secretary, what did the President mean when he said that China should defend the East?
Well, no, everyone basically in the meeting was talking about globalization, trade liberalization, and of course that Asia was benefiting greatly from globalization and trade liberalization. So basically, it was an endorsement of China's position that the world trading system should be governed by the rules-based WTO system, and that there should be no obstacles to further globalization and liberalization.
Defend the East from whom?
There was a mention against from whom, but of course this was in relation to the possible trade war between the China and the United States.
But you clarified that the President is not siding with anyone with regard to the trade.
He basically reiterated we're not siding, but of course everyone in BOAO was emphasizing on the need to further strengthen globalization and the need to further speed up trade liberalization to benefit everyone, rather than a return to isolationist trade policies.
Thank you, Secretary.
Secretary, I'm Marian Benitez from South China Morning Post. I'd like to ask you, because it's a bit fast, need to clarify whether all these are just memorandum of agreement, or is it already in place? And how much altogether are we talking about in each of these projects that you've signed? I mean, the President Duterte has signed during the talks with President Xi Jinping, right? Just
yes.
clarify, please, because you're saying about $9.5 billion worth of projects. I'm not sure whether it's yuan or US or Philippine peso. And also, the other thing is, can you talk more about the Belt and Road Initiative? How, because it's quite big in Hong Kong, they're trying to set out this initiative by sea, to somehow use this development program on the Silk Road in Asia and also Europe and globally. So the other question I've got is the Filipino English teachers, which we know about, but could you just clarify? And Mr. Andanar, Secretary, you're talking about this media cooperation, which is quite unusual, right? Because for China, as we know, there's media control. So how does that fit with the Philippine system of democracy?
Let me first answer that there's a distinction between the bilateral agreements entered into by the Philippine government, and let me hasten to add that the President did not sign anything. He witnessed the signing. No? As far as the bilateral agreements are concerned, although they were entered into by the two sovereign states, the President witnessed the agreements. The line secretaries, respective line secretaries, were the ones who entered into these agreements. No? Now, the 500 million renminbi, or 3.8 billion, was part of the agreement signed by Secretary Dominguez. No? Now, the 9.5 billion were private agreements, no? Memorandums signed between private entities who intend to invest in the Philippines, and the President was witness to these agreements. No? And of course, the agreements, the memorandum of intent or memorandum of agreement were signed on the part of private investors and the Department of Trade and Industry. No? So two sets of agreements, the private investments and the bilateral agreements. I think Secretary Andanar, there's a question for you.
Just clarify as well, if there are memorandum of agreements, which means the money is not set, it's not cast in stone, shall we say, right? And also, is there a time frame? Is it in the next 5 years or 10 years? Or
They all
immediately?
had their own individual time frames, no? So I can't really
So can we have
answer
those
which
details?
one.
Is it possible to have those details? If you
I
can?
think yes, the DTI can provide you details, no, with these things, no, but I can't do it now,
All right.
if that's what
Thank
you're
you.
saying, because there were quite a number of agreements signed of
Okay.
private investments. No? Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. We must look into the beauty about this media exchange program with China in terms of the technology and the technical know-how that we can learn from television, radio, print, and online. We all know that the Xinhua News Agency is one of the most successful news agencies in the world, and CCTV is also one of the largest broadcasting television network in the world. China Radio International also. So in terms of management, in terms of the technology that they are using, we in the Philippine government media have so much to learn from them. So we should look at it from that point of view. But in terms of reporting, I'm sure that we have different ideologies and different paradigms in reporting. Thank you.
Yes, Henry.
Hi, Secretary, good afternoon. In a meeting of Chinese investors with the President, did any investor, businessman, or capitalist mention about putting up a casino in Boracay?
No one.
Okay. Another question. Before he left for Boracay, he did mention that he doesn't know anything about putting up a casino in that area. But there are reports back in December, a courtesy call made by those investors who is interested in putting up a casino. What was the palace explanation on this?
I'm not sure what the question is.
President Duterte denied, in fact, that he knows something about the casino. Possible putting up a casino in Boracay. But there are reports that he entertained all those investors in Malacanang back in December. So he denied, but he in fact entertained those investors of the casino.
Well, of
So
course, we welcome all investors, but I think the President has already addressed the issue of a new casino in Boracay. There will be no new casino in Boracay.
So the palace stand by its.
That's the President's declaration. I don't have to annotate. He said so in his departure statement. It was not a statement, a departure statement. It was his own words. So we can't modify his words.
All right.
Secretary, may ano lang, si Chus Dinu from Manila. May sinasabi raw ba si PRRD na invalid yung nilagdaan ng PagCorp or casino ng Galaxy sa Boracay? Ano mangyayari roon? Hindi ba yon makasisira sa pinopromote ng Pangulo na magandang sistema daw ng pagninegosyo sa bansa?
Well, I do not know what the status is, but the president's thinking is that because of the Supreme Court decision that Boracay is state-owned, he, as president, would have to make a proclamation, no, whenever there is a particular use intended for any portion of Boracay. And that's the context by which he said, perhaps we will give it to the farmers. No? Now, as I said, the president is always serious, but let's not take him literally. Perhaps what the president was saying is that Boracay should be used and should be for the benefit of all Filipinos and not just the owners of the rich resort establishments. I'd like to welcome Foreign Affairs Secretary Alan Peter Cayetano. Thank you for joining us. And now you can ask questions on foreign affairs. No?
Jam, si
So I
Sante.
think I've answered your question, no, on the Boracay Casino.
Follow up. Use the microphone, Jam. The Boracay issue. Sir, what will happen to the provisional license granted by PagCorp to Galaxy Casino, since the president made that declaration that there would be no casinos in Boracay?
Well, you see, the president was highlighting that because of the decision of the Supreme Court on Boracay, no, it is the president that could actually authorize through proclamation how Boracay should be utilized. So perhaps the license will, if there is any at all, no, I do not know how this will be resolved, but as far as Boracay is concerned, he wants the people to benefit from Boracay. He wants the closure of Boracay to foreign tourists was intended to preserve the island for the next coming generations, to be recognized and to be remembered as a paradise island. And that's the latest announcement of the president. Okay?
Follow-up, Boracay, other issue? Other issues, please?
Yes.
Follow-up on... Please use the microphone, please. Maybe it's more appropriate for Secretary Cayetano. One of the, I think it was Manila Bulletin who said that President Xi Jinping has accepted an invitation from President Duterte to visit Hong Kong, I mean, not Hong Kong, but visit the Philippines in November. Can you just confirm that? And also, what's the reason for that and the state visit? And do we have enough protection for the Chinese president to really host him in his state visit?
Well, let me start by quoting President Xi Jinping excuse me, over dinner and during the bilaterals. No? He quoted President Duterte during their first meeting. What President Duterte told him and President Xi repeated is that he said, Mr. President, I remember in our first meeting, you told me, what is important is you know me and I know you, and you trust me and I trust you. Then President Xi Jinping went on to say, this is the essence of state-to-state relationship. The mutual trust. You know, there are no perfect relationships among nations around the world. There are struggles, there are challenges. But when the leaders and, of course, their people trust each other, then you're given the momentum and the platform to resolve issues. So high-level visits, like the 3 visits of the President to China, the visit of the Chinese Premier to Manila during the 50th anniversary for ASEAN, you know, are invaluable. You know, issues are resolved, cooperation and plans to collaborate are put together, and this face-to-face diplomacy and face-to-face interaction really grows the relationship. So I will confirm that we have invited President Xi for a number of times, and he accepted subject to the time that's mutually convenient. So we are readying for the end of the year, but we don't have any final plans yet. So we haven't got word from them because usually, you know, what happens there is that they propose a date, then we say if it's acceptable or not, or we give them a couple of dates and then everything pushes through. But it depends on the culture and tradition of that country. And I've noticed the Chinese, when they have a state visit, it's very much well prepared. And there are a lot of agreements, there are a lot of projects that are lined up aside from the existing projects. So it's not going to be simply President Xi and President Duterte meeting. There's going to be substantive agreements, there's going to be announcements, there's going to be a boost in the momentum of our relationship with them.
Just follow up, please. I'm from the Morning Post, Mary Ann. The security precautions for President Xi, will it be the same sort of security that we're seeing for President Duterte in Hong Kong, although it's an unofficial visit? One, and also how prepared are we, especially considering the bus hostage situation? When was that? In 2015 under Noy Noy, right? Or 2010?
2010. Yes.
Will because as you know, Chinese people have a long memory, and because of this bus hostage situation, people are afraid of going to the Philippines. That's why maybe it's the reason why our tourism arrivals in the Philippines is a bit, not really satisfactory when compared to Thailand or Japan, Korea, or the mainland even.
Yeah.
So can you just address the situation? the law
Well,
and
Marianne,
order
if you can
situation,
allow
please?
me 2 or 3 minutes and the rest of the press corps, good evening, to address your last statement, because that's a valid and important statement wherein people are asking, is it safe to travel to the Philippines? You may be referring to certain crimes committed or experiences by some foreigners in the past, or you may be referring to a concerted effort by some ideological groups or political groups around the world who's really trying to sell the world an image of impunity and lack of rule of law in the Philippines. That's why the trust of the Department of Foreign Affairs, aside from OFWs and economic diplomacy, is been inviting people who are judging us to go to the Philippines. I'll give you a quick example, no? Freedom of the press. Sure, there are issues. I will not debate here that the safety of the press, media, is paramount. There are issues we're facing. Rappler recently had an issue with both the SEC and the PALA. So we're not denying any of that. But I asked my friends in the Western media, what's more free, your media or our media? Couldn't answer. So I asked them, can you in your country say that a politician or the president is a murderer if you don't have any proof? Can you say that a politician is corrupt without giving any details? In the Philippines, you can. In Singapore, you have to have the proof. If not, whether defamation or libel. In the US, it's the same thing. In Europe, it's the same thing. But in the Philippines, the reality is whether on Facebook, on your web pages, or on your newspapers, you can practically say anything because we lean towards the leniency, the freedom of expression, more than the responsibility of this freedom. No? So it's the same thing. Before the Duterte administration, precisely the issue of ordinary people were safety. Families were being massacred. 2-year-old, 1-year-old, 5-year-old women were being, children were being raped. Families were being torn apart, literally, abused left and right. And if you look at the statistics, 77,000 have been murdered during the Aquino administration. So, but since it's not what the liberal left calls the extrajudicial killings, or because President Aquino and his team talk politically correct, they were not showing a picture of extrajudicial killings in the Philippines. Comes Duterte, who says that I want a safe and comfortable life. Suddenly, the Philippines is the wild, wild east. But coming over, we do have our problems, we do have our issues, but people are saying it's safer now. people are walking the streets in the evening, and people are afraid to sell drugs. Some of our ASEAN neighbors are telling us, give us some advice on drugs because it's increasing here. And what did some of our security people say? They're moving to you because they're scared to do it in the Philippines. Because we know we will deal with you decisively. So question, can we assure foreign dignitaries of safety when they go to the Philippines? As we all know, when there's a visit, extraordinary naman yung preparations for security. And APEC in 2015 and the 50th year of ASEAN last year is proof not only of the brilliance, resilience, creativity of Filipinos in hosting, but also of our security forces. Our police and military and other security forces from the local government to the national government have gotten pretty good. How many heads of state were in the Philippines, both sa APEC and sa ASEAN, no? But, it's not only, the president is concerned and wants people to be, we believe that people are happy with President Duterte. We believe the president are happy with what's happening now, no? But the happiness or content of people will be decided whether they feel safe in their homes, in school, in work, whether they feel safe going to the office and not. That's why when there are abuses, whether it's by the police or military, we take it seriously. But we also have to take seriously the drug problem. So directly answering your question, yes, we have assured the Chinese of not only great hospitality, warm welcome, but also of the necessary security preparations.
And I'd like to dispute your last statement that there's been a decline in the arrival of Chinese tourists. On the contrary, since President Duterte took over, we've almost doubled the number of Chinese visitors to the Philippines from 500,000 to almost 1 million now, just for the record.
Secretary Rocky, just a clarification on Boracay. You said you don't know the status of Galaxy. But in general, kung merong permit yung isang company na balak magtayo ng casino sa Boracay, given this new policy now of the president, is it deemed revoked?
Well, I can't say because you see, the license must have been issued by PAGCOR. But the president was talking about the physical existence of a casino in Boracay, which he will not allow unless he has issued a proclamation to this effect because of the decision that Boracay, the island, is state-owned. Okay. So they could have a provisional license. If they can't build in Boracay, perhaps they could build elsewhere. That's why I'm not saying unequivocally about the status of the Galaxy contract. But if the building of the casino in Boracay is what is at issue, then I have to reiterate already what the president personally said. I don't have to annotate what the president has already stated.
When can we expect this proclamation and what will this proclamation contain?
Well, as I said, it's up to the president to decide who will be given actually tenurial rights in Boracay. He has said that he would like to give priority to the ordinary Filipinos, to the farmers, if they are. But for the time being, the task at hand is to preserve Boracay for the future generation.
So when? Wala pa pong...
Wala naman time
Wala
frame.
pang time frame. Okay,
Yes.
thank you, Sec.
Boracay. Boracay muna and then South China
Kasi
Sea.
tama ba sir, you earlier said na void na yung license, void ab initio?
Well, I did send that text message, because as far as Boracay is concerned, I did clarify this with the president, and the president said, as far as Boracay is concerned, I have not issued any proclamation that will authorize any casino in Boracay itself. And so, but I can't address the issue of the license because that just means maybe they can open shop elsewhere. But I do not know. But as far as Boracay is concerned, that's the presidential proclamation on the matter.
Okay, still on Boracay. Still on Boracay.
Yep.
Henry.
Yeah. Secretary, yung pagsasailalim ng Boracay Island sa agrarian reform, kailan ho ito ba talaga plano ng Pangulo na mangyari? At after ba nung maglilinis dito, wala nang turistang papayagan? Isa sa ilalim
Hindi
ba agad
po.
dito sa agrarian reform law?
Hindi po. Ang ine-emphasize lang ng presidente, unang-una, linisin muna natin ang Boracay nang sigurado tayo na yung susunod na henerasyon makita ang kagandahan ng Boracay. Pangalawa, sisiguraduhin niya na magbenepisyong ordinaryong Pilipino sa Boracay, hindi yung mga nagmamay-ari ng mga dambuhalang mga resorts dyan. No? Pero hindi naman intensyon na wala nang papupuntahin sa Boracay. Ang gusto nga natin kaya natin linilinisin para hindi masira ang Boracay at makita ng lahat ang Boracay, makilala ng lahat ang Boracay bilang isang paraiso.
So right now, anong pinag-uusapan? Buong Boracay or part lang ng Boracay ang isa sa ilalim sa agrarian reform?
Well, ang sabi ko nga po, titignan po natin yan dahil ang emphasis ng presidente, makinabang yung mga maliliit na nandoon na sa Boracay. So, alam mo, yung proclamation na yan, wala pong bago naman yan dahil meron naman tayong batas talaga. It's a law. It's not just a program. It's a comprehensive agrarian reform law. So, kung meron talaga mga claimants dyan, di dapat ma-process ang kanilang mga claims ng Department of Agrarian Reform. No? So, kung wala namang claimants dyan, at ang issue is paano ngayon ang gagawin dahil karamihan ng Boracay wala pang titulo, well, dyan papasok ngayon ang presidente kasi siya yung may kapangyarihan magproklama kung ano mangyayari doon sa mga titulo na yan para umusad yung proseso ng pagtititulo. Pangalawa po, yung pag-issue rin ng titulo, yan po yung nakabinbin pa sa Kongreso kasi ang kapangyarihan ng presidente to proclaim na alienable and disposable. Ngayon po kasi karamihan dyan forest preserve, no? Pero yung pag-issue ng title dyan dahil ito nga isang forest preserve, yan po yung nakabinbin pa sa Kongreso. Kaya nga po, yan ang naging resulta nung desisyon ng Korte Suprema, no? Na kailangan magkaroon ng batas para maging basehan na magkaroon ng titulo.
Under the law, yung mga walang titulo ho, anong mangyayari?
Well, unang-una po, ang sabi ni Presidente, pag nagkaroon na talaga ng pagkakataon na mag-i-issue ng titulo, sisiguraduhin niya yung mga mamamayan muna makikinabang, hindi muna yung mga dambuhalang mga resorts. Okay? So, pangalawa po ngayon, under the law, yung mga MITAX declarations po sila, kung qualified na pursuant to the law, then their tenure, yung kanilang possession, no, ang magiging isa sa basehan ng pag-i-issue ng titulo sa kanila. No? So, importante rin mapatunayan na kayo po ay in open, continuous possession of land na wala pang titulo para mabigyan rin kayo ng titulo.
Okay, thank you, Henry. Other issue, Laila?
On Boracay pa ba? Meron pa bang Boracay?
Other issue
Exhausted
sir.
na? Oh.
Sir, you mentioned that the two leaders discussed joint offshore oil development.
No, I didn't mention. I mentioned that it was raised, but there was no substantial discussion. But Secretary Cayetano will answer that.
As you know, in the bilaterals, there's limited time. And just like this, diba, you probably all have 1,000 questions, but you limit yourself to 1 + 1 follow-up or 2 + 2 follow-ups. No? So in the bilaterals, we prepare what our side wants their side to hear and discuss and what their side. So as the President Duterte said, the consensus is holding. The Chinese have not built and continue to commit to us that they will not build on uninhabited areas, including Scarborough. They have committed to us that Section 5 of DOC, and we have committed not only to them but to ASEAN that we will not do things that will further complicate. No? Of course, there's still a problem in the inhabited features, not only Philippines, China, but also Malaysia, Vietnam, and other claimants. No? So the Chinese side brought up the fact that the South China Sea, there's been positive momentum. Number two, that it is a complex issue because unlike the East China Sea, where the issues are more simple because it's between China and Japan, and the issues can be laid out quite mas madali lang talaga, no? But in South China Sea, there's territorial claim, there's a claim under UNCLOS, there's multiple claimants, and then there's the security aspect of all the nations there, no? Then there's also issue of what are the rights of those from the outside the region, which includes freedom of navigation, freedom of overflight, and freedom to put submarine cables in accordance with international law. So basically, President Xi said that, these are complex issues. These are issues that, evoke a lot of emotions and the public is very concerned about. So we have to take into consideration public opinion from all sides. But this is an issue, if handled properly, can make the South China Sea a area of peace and stability. So he did mention that if the Philippines would consider joint exploration, we're sticking to exploration first. We're not discussing development yet. Not at least in a manner that's as advanced as joint exploration. So basically, that's where President Xi stopped in saying that China, if that's what the Philippines wants, is willing to discuss and find a solution in that area. And that's where President Duterte jumped in to say, that it's important that our people see the benefit of our relationship. It's important that we get something out of there. But, it was clear to both sides that we will stick to our guns, we'll stick to our claims, and let's see how we can get anything from there. So this wasn't discussed, this part, but first, exploration is simply seeing what's there. It's research work, diba? Finding out how much oil, how much gas, if any, is there. Now, once we see the amounts and everything, then we can go to the next step. Is it viable? Is there a commercial quantity? What's the quality of the oil that's there? And from there, that's the only time that you have to think about development. And way back last year, we already told the world, including the Chinese, including some of the critics in the Philippines, that we desire a contract that is as good or better than Malampaya. Why as good or better than Malampaya? Because Malampaya is in an is in an area that there is no dispute. It's fully under Philippine laws. Yet we're getting 60-40. So the reason we want that, not only so that it can favor the Philippines and the Filipino people can enjoy the benefits of these natural resources, but also so that there will be no question to anyone that under the Constitution and under the laws, the Filipinos are getting what is due to us. Because if they're going to give the same deal that Malampaya did, and this is areas that are disputed versus undisputed, how can you argue with that? But as I said, that's going in advance, which is our job. Our job in negotiations or seeking out the opinion of other claimants. I have talked to other countries about it, including the other claimants, and have assured them that we will talk to China in areas that the dispute is only between the Philippines and China. If the areas is disputed by Vietnam, Philippines, and China, then the three of us will talk if there will be any talks. If it's between the four of us with Malaysia and with Brunei, that's five. So that's how we will approach it. We will not make any enemies. No, we are building friendship with everyone. So that's so maybe the question is how important was that statement made by the two leaders? Very important because it's basically the go signal to come up with a framework, and if it's acceptable by both sides, then we could see the joint exploration done soon.
Sir, do you have a timeline? Because Ambassador Santa Romana quoted you saying that you hope to finalize this within a couple of months.
ASAP actually for us, because Malampaya will be running out in a couple of years, and the market for LNG is growing. The technology is also there. Several countries, including China and Japan, are interested in the what do you call it, plant or LNG plant. Yeah, and well, in several projects, which includes the storage and the and how the transshipment of LNG is done. So let me put it this way. If our legal minds the DFA, the Department of Energy, Malacanang, and some of our consultants can come up with a framework tomorrow, I will send that to the Chinese tomorrow. If they can send it back to us the next day and they say they agree, then we can start drafting the MOU or the agreement and vetting it for official okay. So the difference between the joint exploration and the present exploration that's being done under the Department of Energy is that may standard na sila eh. Diba? They know how to either bid it out or the service contract areas. They know how to everything is black and white already. So you're a company who wants to do exploration or development in the Philippines, you find a partner, this is what you do, this is the legal requirements. But in this case, it's an extraordinary situation because there are territorial disputes. So we will not be giving up any part of our territory. Experts from around the world have told us you cannot divide territory. Territory is indivisible. But sovereignty rights, by its nature, it's economic rights. So if I give you a car and I say it's still mine, but you can make money out of it, no, it's your choice. You want to use it as a taxi, Grab, Uber. You want to lease it out. You want to park and make it a tourist attraction or selfie attraction if it's a really nice car. It's up to you. No, so just because we have economic rights over our EEZ does not mean that we cannot, have our own arrangement with other countries. A good example of that is tuna fishing. We do fish in other areas, the exclusive economic zone of other countries, but we get licenses. We pay fees. We pay taxes to those licenses that are given. So it really depends on the situation and our technical and financial capability, and then, of course, the legal framework. No? But the bottom line here is that after all this fighting in the South regarding the South China Sea, West Philippine Sea, are the Filipinos going to get anything out of it? And if we are going to get anything, is it going to be a fair share in accordance with both the law and morality?
Okay, last two. Can we have our friends from? Yeah, please. Microphone. CNN, can you use the microphone, please? Thank you.
Two different topics. First of all, just on the potential trade war between the US and China, are you worried about that impacting the Philippines and the region? And just again, what do you mean by it's time for China to protect the East? Which you said earlier.
To me?
Yeah. well, to Secretary
I've actually answered that earlier,
No, I know, but in terms of the impact on the Philippines, and also, you say that you're impartial, but what do you mean by that? By the comment about, China protecting the East?
Well, let me take on the question about the trade war. In all kinds of war, there are no winners, and I think everyone acknowledges that. And all around the world, smart people, brilliant people, economists, people in finance are banging their heads in how to prevent an all-out trade war around the world and how to, make economies more inclusive. And in the Philippines, we know too well that when America sneezes, the rest of the world gets a cold. That's something we heard a lot in the 70s, 80s. We heard again during the Asian financial crisis in 97 and, of course, in 2007. So now, if U.S. is sneezing and China is coughing, definitely the Philippines will somehow be susceptible to the flu. So, but, there are flu shots already available. So our economic team is doing everything to try to bulletproof our economy. But as you know, there's no such thing as bulletproofing economy. We just can do our best, put our experts on the industries that we want to flourish, the investments we want to attract. So we're hoping that this so-called trade war will be short-lived, and we're hoping it doesn't affect us too much, especially because we're on, I think, our is it 6th year or 7th year of economic progress, of good economic progress. Now, in terms of, I don't know really that, who said that statement about China protecting the East? Okay. It's a multipolar world. It's not the Cold War anymore. It's not black and white and left and right, and so we do know that superpowers around the world have different rules. We should all have the same rules, but the reality is superpowers have different rules. Cuba was not part of the territory of the U.S., but they did not allow the Soviets at that time, the former USSR, to put missiles there. And USSR did not have any claims on Turkey, but they did not allow the missiles there. That's why the Cuban Missile Crisis happened. And when the USSR said that we will not continue putting missiles on Cuba, part of the deal was taking out the missiles from Turkey. So ours is not saying that China is correct or China should do this or etc. But we have to recognize they're a rising power, if not already a superpower. And any superpower will be careful about their national security. So if multiple claimants and the different claimants are putting some defensive assets on the features they hold, and then other maritime powers are sending their ships into the South China Sea, of course, there are two reactions. Either one, we feel safer, or the other reaction is there might be a arms race, and we don't want that. The Philippines is the only claimant, aside from Brunei, that's not putting any military assets even defensive assets on the features we hold. So we want to play a productive role. We want a rollback, or a return to how the features in the South China Sea was 20, 30, 40 years ago. But it's not going to happen if it's only the Philippines and China who are talking. So all the players in the region, including the players outside the region, have to talk. Because if not, it will not be solved. And I think one of the other secretaries told us when we were on our way, when we were in Buao, is that, China has a right to its national security. So we're not saying we agree with what they're doing, but we have to have empathy to be able to deal with them, talk to them, and build mutual trust. So, a lot of, I think most, is it 70% of China's economy is through that channel and through coastal states. So if you reverse it, if China was the US or China was Canada or China was Great Britain, they'd be very conscious about security there because their whole economy and national security, is dependent on that sea lane, and that area of the ocean.
Just one more question on a different topic. Does your government have any questions for Facebook about the apparent data breach, which affected, I think, over 1 million Filipinos?
I've answered that. No, the current finance secretary, who was treasurer of the president's campaign, said he did not pay even a single centavo to Cambridge Analytica, and that he had no transactions at all with Cambridge Analytica.
Sorry, that wasn't my question. It was just in terms of, in general, of the apparent data breach.
We have a domestic law, a Privacy Act, no, and we will enforce that act, no. Now, the data breach, as far as we know, did not occur in the Philippines, no. So, but we have taken steps, as you know, no less than a chairman of a constitutional commission, the constitutional on elections, has a pending case now before the prosecutor's office for breach, no, of the Privacy Act, no, for not safeguarding the data of voters in the Philippines. So we take privacy very seriously in the Philippines.
Thank you.
Can I just quickly, from a regular Filipino's point of view, of course there are concerns about privacy, but on the other hand, there's also concern about the future of Facebook, because Facebook has made the Philippines much more democratic. So suddenly, if you're from just like the internet, there's now a platform for e-commerce. There's a platform to communicate, whether you're student organizations or you're a budding social, whether you're an influencer, whether you're a event organizer. So Facebook has been a good friend to the Filipino. And there are challenges. So if your good friend told other good friends about your secrets, you have a problem with your good friend. So definitely there's a problem that of this data breach. But we're also concerned about our friend, which is Facebook. So we're eagerly monitoring and watching. And it's all over Facebook, how the leadership of Facebook is answering the U.S. Congress. And we have had, I think, 3 hearings in the Senate about fake news, and Facebook has been part of that. So on one hand, it's such a blessing, and it's created so much opportunity. On the other hand, of course, we're also concerned about privacy.
Okay, thank you. Can we have our last question? Yeah, Miss? Yeah.
Hi, my name is Yajo and I'm from CNN as well. This question is for the Foreign Secretary. You mentioned that there are easing tensions on the South China Sea, and spokesperson Harry has also mentioned the large amounts of private investment going into the Philippines from China. I was wondering if it's fair to say that Philippines' position on China right now is prosperity first, sovereignty second.
Are you from the U.S.? No.
No.
No, I only asked because I wanted to check if you're from the U.S., then you'd know U.S. history. The French helped the United States become an independent nation. And when the French had their revolution, they asked the Americans for help. But the Americans had to think what's best for them at that point in time. And they decided not to help the French in the French Revolution. So did America go for prosperity first before sovereignty? Or before their ideals or their principles? So each nation, whether it's China, Singapore, US, Canada, acts within its interest. And I'll ask you, what nation wants to have an argument with their neighbors? So, because if you say prosperity first before sovereignty, that means we're giving up our sovereignty. So it's the same thing. If you're saying to America, you gave up your principle so that you'll have prosperity. I don't believe. I believe that they made the decision based on the information that was there and look what was good for America at that time, and they made that decision. And we can point out to a lot of historical decisions by many countries that people might not have agreed with, but it's best for their people. So we're not giving up a single inch of our sovereignty nor sovereignty rights. Our critics, not only in the Philippines but outside, is making it appear that because there's an arbitration award, there's no more dispute. But there are 2 disputes. It's the territorial dispute and the dispute under UNCLOS. And what the arbitration court dealt with was the UNCLOS dispute. And there is no enforcement mechanism in the arbitration court. And President talked to our allies, our Western allies, and asked them, or if we start digging for oil, drilling for oil there, will you send our ships and will you guard our ships? You know what was the answer of our Western allies? We don't get involved in issues of territorial claims. So what are we going to do? Are we going to... And it's the same thing with Malaysia and Vietnam. We have claims against them. So do we stop our relationship, or do we start fighting Vietnam and Malaysia? Do we start arguing with them in every forum available because we have a dispute regarding sovereignty? So your question is fair, and it's being asked around the world, and I get those questions whether in private meetings or in press briefings. But it's not really between prosperity and sovereignty. It's how you fight for your sovereignty and at the same time take care of your people. So the prosperity of the Filipinos coming from China is not because we gave up sovereignty, but because of how we're dealing with issues of territorial claims and sovereignty. China has not asked us, and I can tell you this very honestly, whether closed door or in open, they've never asked us to give up our claims. They've simply asked us to put some order in how we will discuss these claims and where we should discuss these claims. And you've seen how ASEAN was handled last year, and you saw our statements, and the Philippines was able to steer it quite well. And I have to give the credit to the Filipinos, you know. So I'm willing to further discuss this at other forums, but, you know, we're open to ideas on how to fight for our sovereignty, territorial claim, etc. But as of now, if we compare the Aquino administration strategy and the Duterte strategy, we simply are making do with a bad situation, but we have stopped the bleeding, meaning we have stopped other claimants from getting new features. We have started discussion on the COC. We have jump-started relationship, people to people, cultural exchanges, educational exchanges, military to military. And let me finish with this, you know. Yes, we want to fight for what is ours, but we don't want a war. And no one in our region wants a war because no one will win. You know, so if you look, it's only the Philippines who are not, you know, building up our defenses in the features we hold. Why? We'd rather spend our money on education, on health. You know, of course, we want an aircraft carrier, we want a submarine someday, you know, and that's part of your national security and part of keeping your people safe, you know. But what good is it to have the best military if your people are starving, if your people don't have jobs, if your people are forced to leave the country, and if your people are not safe, you know. So our priorities really is building our economy and keeping our people safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Secretary Roque.
Thank you very much and good evening.
Okay, back to our main studio in the Philippines, People's Television and Radyo Pilipinas.